Welcome, everybody. Before we begin our discussion tonight, I want to offer a little bit different take on the land acknowledgement. We're gathered tonight on land that was once the home of native peoples, including the Amamutsan. This land, this home, was taken from these people, and this fact has a direct through line to homelessness today. Some people acquire more and more land and property and wealth, and this system has continued to displace people in our time. Let us acknowledge this tonight. As we begin our program tonight, I want to offer a word of thanks and acknowledgement to those who made this event possible, in addition to our guests. I also want to thank the folks at Bookshop Santa Cruz who helped publicize this event and are here tonight so you can purchase a signed copy of this groundbreaking book. I'd like to thank the caring students in the Sociology 160 Solving Homelessness class at UCSC. They were the inspiration for inviting the guests to speak with the community. And lastly, to all of you, thank you for joining us tonight in the spirit of learning and understanding about some issues that continue to trouble our community. So, here we go. I'm just going to offer some words of introduction and then turn things over to Brian Barth to move us through the presentation.
Who are you?
I am Victor Willis, librarian at the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. And the other librarian who helped organize this is Jessica Goodman back there in the corner. We're here tonight to discuss, so here we go. At the end of the, I'm gonna turn things over to Brian, and he will move us through the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we look forward to moderating some questions from all of you. And then we encourage you to visit the bookshop table outside to purchase your own copy of Front Street. We're here tonight to discuss at least a few key issues. One issue is the encampments occupied by people who are not housed in conventional dwellings. This phenomenon is quite visually familiar to us here in Santa Cruz and in many communities across California and the US. However, very few housed people know the full realities of life in an encampment. And the Front Street book and our panel tonight will give us a fuller picture. Another pair of issues is autonomy and leadership. Many housed people simply see encampment dwellers as impoverished and troubled souls. What we often fail to see is not only the humanity and individuality of these folks, we also fail to see their intelligence and their leadership capabilities. And at least one other issue we'll explore. What are the models our community should consider as we look at both interim and longer-term solutions to what can only be called a vexing challenge? With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Brian Barth to take it from here, and he'll introduce the other members of our panel. Before writing Front Street, Brian studied at UC Santa Cruz and went on to write for many top magazines and newspapers, including the Washington Post, the New Yorker, the Guardian, the Nation, and National Geographic. What I think is so remarkable about his new book, in addition to his exploration of homeless folks living in encampments adjacent to the great wealth of the Bay Area, is it shows Brian's own journey to understand homelessness. If you haven't had a chance to read this book to its conclusion, I hope you'll do that and continue your own journey of understanding and compassion. With that, I turn it over to Brian.
So yeah, thank you all. It's good to be back in Santa Cruz. I spent 12 of the best years of my life here. Proud UCSC. Proud UCSC dropout. And, lived for a while myself in the woods up on campus, and this has been an incredible journey writing this book the last 5 years of my life, and a huge part of that journey has been three of the folks sitting right here from Wood Street in Oakland, Ifalayo, Lamonte Ford, John Janosco from Wood Street Commons. And we're also joined tonight by the president of the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, Alicia Kuhl. And Don Lane, former mayor of Santa Cruz, probably many of you know him, and longtime part of the local affordable housing and home services. You know, I had never really, I hadn't written about homelessness, I hadn't interacted with homelessness before I started working on this book. And it was one of those topics that to me was like big, heavy, scary, dark. And I don't feel that way at all 5 years later. You know, I actually feel very excited to be working in this space. The process of writing the book really transformed me from a journalist to an advocate. And you know, what my friends on Wood Street taught me was like, homelessness it is heavy, and it is dark, and it is gnarly, but like that's only half the story. So a lot of what's in this book is the other half of the story, which is a story about vibrant communities full of dreamers with ideas about how to better their situation and the world in the process. And so I will share a little bit more about that, but mostly what I'd like to do is not talk at you, but talk with you. And there is obviously in this community an incredible diversity of experiences of homelessness, of ideas about what to do about it, and things being done about it. But to set the stage, I will read a very short section of the book about Wood Street Commons that I think will, rather than me just ad-libbing, will kind of get us all on kind of one vibe a little bit. So I will sit back down. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just really
Give her the
being
mic.
called. I'm really being called right now just to take a moment of silence for all of our relatives on the streets that didn't make it off the streets, that, you know, we continue to do this work for, that the violence of being unhoused caused them to transition. So if we could just do that really quick. Thank you, and I just wanted to, you know, recognize them and that they still walk with us and they're the reason why we continue to do this work. Ashe.
I met Monte, this guy here, on a July morning at his camp in Oakland, which stretched for a mile along Wood Street and bulged 100 yards back from the curb beneath a tangle of overpasses known as the MacArthur Maze. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
It was infamous among California's mega camps, a place news reports reference Mad Max to describe. Mountains of junk, hard-looking dudes ambling about, and an incredible number of burnt-out cars. A Hollywood rendering of the apocalypse is an apt, if uncreative, means to explain Wood Street's outer appearance. But the news reports miss the seeds of Eden hiding in the dystopia and the tender hearts residing in the hard-looking dudes. The roughly 300 residents of the camp referred to the place, their home, as Wood Street Commons. I walked through the gates of Wood Street Commons to find a small outdoor stage where Monte sat on a canvas director's chair in a loose-fitting leather jacket, pink shirt, blue tie, and cowboy boots. Gathered around him was an assortment of fellow residents, housed friends of the camp, and a handful of city officials who looked rather uncomfortable. Several members of the media were present. A PA sat near the edge of the stage. Soft drinks and snacks were spread on a table as folks lounged about on couches waiting for the event to begin. The stage was backed with walls made from pallets, an IKEA bed frame, and other scavenged material. Shade came courtesy of white fabric strung loosely between crooked wooden poles, along with a forest green cafe umbrella with Starbucks printed on it in white letters. I spotted several hypodermic needles on the ground, along with a dead rat. Propped on a table was a board displaying architectural plans that illustrated how the dystopia might be reorganized a bit to reveal the jewels within. The plans showed the locations of individual homesteads, as well as community facilities, including a flea market, bike repair shop, office space, and the Moose Pit Cafe, located next to a shed belonging to a resident named Moose. All of this and more already existed, though very informally and largely obscured by the cluttered aesthetics of the place. Meals for 50 plus were prepared daily over a large fire pit. An adjacent pantry stocked dried goods and fresh fruits and vegetables, free for whoever needed them. Donated supplies such as clothes and toiletries were generally available. Solar panels had begun to replace the power cords that pirated energy from nearby streetlights. Communal water tanks, filled by a volunteer with a water truck, had relieved the need to tap illicitly into city supplies. A pair of steel shipping containers provided lockable storage, a critical step to stability in a place where people were afraid to leave their possessions unattended, for fear they would be pilfered. Security cameras and lighting had been installed in some corners of the camp. If a female resident needed an escort back to her place at night, a call went out on the camp's walkie-talkie network. To accommodate their many Zoom calls with the media, NGOs, and government officials, they built an outdoor conference room that included an orange and blue wall of padded fabric that made for a professional-looking video backdrop. The purpose of the event was to convince the city officials who wanted to tear the camp down to support the residents in developing the Wood Street Commons vision instead. The city had plans for 170 units of so-called affordable housing on the portion of the camp where we gathered, just a few steps away from Monte's handcrafted home, which had a small putting green in the yard and a mailbox that said 1707 Wood Street out front. 7 units of the city's proposed development were designated for homeless veterans and 6 for young adults exiting foster care. The majority were designated for households making 60 to 120% of Oakland's median income, which translates to an annual salary of roughly $75,000 to $150,000. The city's plan for the camp's residents was to move them into cubicle-like tiny homes inside a fenced lot down the street where they would be lorded over by security guards and subject to a litany of rules governing their lives. The meeting was facilitated by Leah, a massage therapist who volunteered at the camp and could sometimes be found kneading her elbows into residents' backs. After she laid out the ground rules and time limits for each speaker, Brian Warwick, a housing coordinator with the city, explained that the $100 million development had been held up for 18 months because of the current situation with the site. Latanda Simmons, the assistant city administrator, struck a more conciliatory tone. "I want to recognize that everybody is frustrated with the city," she said, "and it's one of the reasons we are here." The residents felt that this and all the shelter options promoted by the city had the same underlying problem. They were based on a way of thinking that did not reflect the values and needs or even the basic dignity of the people they were designed to shelter. The residents weren't interested in submitting to the city's shelters and their wardens. They viewed this as a downgrade from their current living situation. "We're people, right? I mean, we really are," said Monte to the officials. The city's plans for the community felt like being forced into a category that does not fit for us, he continued. "This," he said, gesturing at the makeshift village that sprawled out from the stage, "is our category." Monte, a veteran, explained to the crowd that he once tried a housing program for unhoused veterans and it nearly killed him. He said the freedom and autonomy of his current living situation were essential to his mental health. "I'm claustrophobic," he said. "Don't put me in a box. I might hang myself." He was not exaggerating. So, and so to sort of take you even a little more to that place of Wood Street, I have a 3-minute video, which is some footage from a documentary that I'm making about the place. And then we'll get into talking with each other.
Another homeless tent city pops up every day, and citizens are scared.
It doesn't look like it's in America.
There's so much trash, human waste, garbage, and just the stench of it.
There's more homeless encampments than coffee shops.
And there's, scuzzy people all over the place, and it has become so dangerous now.
The zombies are taking them.
No one that comes here for no reason. And once they get here, that reason tends to change.
Actively committed to act or trying to kill myself.
I was out here to die.
But somewhere on that path of destruction that I was on, I found this community. And this community, I found life again.
There's a lot of people out here that will tell you that they've met this thing that has changed them. It's infectious.
One thing is apparent is the love that exists there. Nobody judges you there. You can self-heal there unconditionally. Anybody can come here. Just that alone is enough to make a person think about bettering themselves. Why would anyone that's out here that has found their spark, why would they want to give that up for something that's less than that spark?
Eviction day is here. The city of Oakland is clearing out the sprawling Wood Street homeless encampment. As expected, police officers were met with resistance to today's sweep.
Fuck that! They're not trying to take us out of here!
When I'm hurt, I get angry.
And it's a ton of you guys out here! With weapons! What the fuck? We're homeless people! You guys have guns!
We've always been the problem for them.
Fuck this shit! I'm going to get my weapon!
At this point, it is the war. And we need to make the fight large enough that the world is watching.
You know, during these times, it makes you wonder really what life is about.
So, you may have noticed briefly in that video, a little poster said, "Homeless helping the homeless." It kind of flashed briefly on the screen. And that was the spirit of Wood Street. That became one of your slogans. But I was wondering if one of you all would just start by sharing, a little more about Wood Street. What was Wood Street to you then, and what is it now?
Go ahead, start from the top.
Oh my God.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is John Janasco. I was a resident of Wood Street, living on Wood Street for about 10 years. Wood Street Commons that we talk about is a piece of Wood Street. It was a parcel of land owned by the city of Oakland, and the Wood Street Commons really just erected about 6 years ago when we started using that name, about 5 or 6 years ago, we really started using that particular name. The community was directed down there, down to Wood Street, the larger community. About 15 years ago, the police department was directed from the city of Oakland administration to start sending people that were unhoused down to Wood Street. And they said, you go down there, you're going to be bothered. And this is why there was just sort of this big migration down to this area down there. Once people got down there, of course, the city of Oakland didn't really know what they were going to do with all these unhoused people out there. So we just started doing it ourselves, basically taking care of ourselves and organizing ourselves. I would say the big part of the organizing started since we've been about 6 years ago when we came to the 1707 lot. And that's when we started just doing a lot more advocating for ourselves. We had, I would say, a few mentors that have helped guide us through this process. There was another traveling journalist that came onto our property, and she was supposed to stay for a couple of weeks, and she ended up staying for like 6 months. And during the time that she was there, she really helped us just like to amplify our voices and really empowered us and let us know that we did have a voice, and we could, you know, demand things that we wanted, and that was better treatment, one of the things. And we wanted to stay on that parcel of land because we had formed a community not just there, but all of Wood Street, like the 300 people plus that actually were living there at the particular time and stuff. This was a real community. And just like all of you guys have your community that you rely on, that you count on, that you can, you know, call on to support you in time of need, but also to celebrate. I want to pass this on to the next, but I want to say this though. You know, there is a dark side of being unhoused. I don't think anybody wants to be unhoused. Nobody's like, I'm going to be unhoused. But there is also this beautiful side of it. And what you see up here is that beautiful side of it, of community, and also the greater community of the housed people, the ones that came down and supported us and really believed in like our ideas and what we wanted to do and what we stood for. And from that, we were able to like create a nonprofit, 501c3 organization, and we go out every Sunday and we you know, we do outreach, we barbecue. We're not out there for an hour or two just giving out sandwiches and stuff. We literally are out there with barbecue grills. We have a speaker. This young man gives free haircuts. We give a harm reduction. We have clothes. We play music. We have tables where people can sit down. We actually spend time with the community, like we did when we were on Wood Street. We spent time with our community there. When we got displaced, we want to continue on doing the work that we're doing for the people that are out there, so we travel around now to all the different communities in Oakland.
So I think part of the question was what Wood Street was to me.
Yeah, and what it is now. You know, anything you want to add to that?
Well, my brother just told you guys what it is now. But it happened out of necessity. This is a time where we were sent to this area with amnesty so that we'd be left alone, and we continued to build there. And we did organically build this huge encampment. And so we started meetings so that we could organize. And like John said, there were other people that came in and helped us out, but it all happened out of necessity. What it meant for me was second, it was a new lease of life for me. I went out there to commit suicide. I had lost all of my family members, and I had no place else really to go. I was 14 years homeless, and 10 years on Wood Street. And I ran into John and a couple of other brothers along the way, and it was a second life for me. And we didn't want it to end at all because I found sobriety through that, like off and on. But yeah, I did. My usage slowed down because I had something to do. I had people around me. I had support. There was food. There was parties. There were birthday parties, celebrations, all kind of things that were there that you know had been missing.
Hey.
And my name is Ifa Layo, and I just want to say that's my new name. I just returned from Nigeria yesterday.
Hey.
I'm now a priestess. But just wanted to say that Wood Street Wood Street in general, you know, aside from the organizing that was going on in the front side of Wood Street, we also built our own small eco-village called Cobb on Wood, where we created our own community kitchen, fully functioning community kitchen, shower, free store, clinic. We had a pizza oven, but from that support of the community really started giving us our own like self-determination. And so when the city came and they were like, we're gonna sweep you and clean up the trash, we said, let's try something different. Let's try to be proactive. Let's work together. Stop causing all this harm on us. And so we tried to start meeting with like Caltrans and saying, well, what are the main issues? Let us try to tackle that, and we scheduled like really big cleanups where we rented bobcats and tractors and had a bunch of volunteers come out, and then the city said stop. They said you aren't qualified, or you don't have the know to throw away your own garbage, so cease and desist. And we're like, wow, we're like really trying to like make a difference here. And so from that and just having that small piece of like our voices again and saying like enough is enough, like stop destroying our homes and our communities. And that's what really like gave us the fight to say, let's do something different. And so we all like, a lot of us resident leaders, I was one of the resident leaders. I didn't say I lived on Wood Street also for 10 years myself. And at one point I had my daughter out there with me, but it was about community, and it was about, we're not victims. Like, we're very capable of taking care of ourselves. We're humans, we're not aliens. And we don't need to be dependent on the city. And so with Wood Street, it's like, let's do these things for ourselves. Let's clean up our own community. Let's feed each other. Let's provide resources and advocate for each other out here. And we continue to do that work even now, like, just educating the community about all these messed up laws and policies that are being made, and showing people how to have their own agency again, and how to be empowered for themselves and get out of this, let me give you this little crumb, this is all you deserve is this. No, we deserve more. And that's where we are today, is really trying to, bring our community together and keep us together and let us have our own voices back.
We did all of that without state government or city funds, and we're still doing it without those funds.
That's right.
So in writing this book, I spent time in a number of different unhoused communities, not just Wood Street.
But we were the best.
But what I want to say about that is, in every one of those communities, I saw the seeds of what you're hearing here, and those seeds were, sprouting and growing to different degrees, and a lot of that was determined by how the longevity of the place. Wood Street was fairly unique in that it actually had several years of existence as an organized community, whereas most unhoused communities, if they last a year in one place, that would be unusual. So, Alicia, I wanted to ask you, like, how does this kind of narrative show up in Santa Cruz? Like, can you help us connect some of these ideas with the unhoused communities that you have been part of here?
I can. Yes, so a lot of you in the audience have probably heard of the Ross encampment. There were about 200 individuals, at least, located behind the Ross camp. I acted as the community, the liaison between the encampment residents and the city, so that the people living at the encampment could get their voices heard. There were all kinds of plans going on about cleaning up the camp, what that looks like, whether or not it was a health and safety hazard. And so I worked with them basically because they were making decisions for the residents of the encampment without speaking to them. And so that's really never okay. One thing that we like to say is nothing about us without us. And so we've been fighting for the seat at the table, similar to what you said, that we are perfectly capable of speaking up. I ran for city council in 2020, which is, I did that to show them, I'm an formerly unhoused person. I've only been in my apartment now for 4.5 years. I spent 5 years on the streets of Santa Cruz in my RV with my family. So homelessness looks a lot of different ways. And that's one thing that I'd like to let people know is that while we are talking about encampments and we're seeing people visibly, there's a humongous demographic of homelessness that's not included in that you're not seeing. That includes veterans, that includes students, that includes single mothers, domestic violence victims, former foster care kids, and I can just go on and on. And so a lot of these, and the working poor. We have homeless people that have jobs, especially here in Santa Cruz, and just can't afford the rent. I echo so much of what you said. It's true here in Santa Cruz. We currently have a large encampment that I'm sure you're all aware of on Coral Street. They were swept yesterday.
What?
They were counted in the pit count. There was a solution for them. They purchased, Housing Matters helped with the county purchase using the Encampment Resolution Fund, a $4 million hotel, but it's not open yet. It was supposed to be open in October. And so while it's not available, the people on Coral Street are being subjected to constant sweeps every single week. And so it's a big issue here. And one thing I also want to bring to attention while I have the mic is that we don't know how many homeless people we have. We use the pit count. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's called a point in time count, where volunteers and service providers that are paid from local nonprofits get together and they go around and they guesstimate how many homeless people they think might be, visually seen. So they'll look at a van and say, oh, does that look like a homeless person? We'll mark it down as maybe. They will see a tent and they'll say there might be one person in there. There could be 3 or 4 people in there. They're not counting the people that are hidden. They're not counting the people that are hiding from stigma. I know that the county and city of Santa Cruz want you to think that we have now about 1,450 people and that they made a decrease over the past year from about 1,850 down to like around 1,400. And they take credit for this decrease and they sit there and they pat themselves on the back. But the truth of the matter is that I did a public records request to the County Human Services Department and I asked them, how many people do you have here that are signed up to the homeless restaurant meal program? That's hot meals for people that are homeless. How many people do you have that are signed up that are receiving Medi-Cal that identify as homeless? How many people do you have in your CalWIN system, in your CalPERS system that identify as homeless? And I got numbers between 5,000 and 7,000. So I have a lot more to say, but I'll pass the mic.
So, when I started working on the book, one thing that was immediately apparent is that the narrative that unhoused folks had about themselves was very different than the media narrative, than the narratives you hear often from policymakers and public officials. And so, and I found that there is just this incredible distrust, within the unhoused communities of, those in positions of power who, were ostensibly, working to help them and had, in California we spend billions of dollars, to help the homeless. And people are like, I'm not like, here and there, yes, those things do help certain people at certain times, but on the whole, there is a sentiment on the streets of like, this system is not working. And certainly I think, the average person, when they're looking at the money that's spent and, observing their community and the unhoused situation there, they also feel like, why isn't it working? Like what's missing here? And so Don, I wanted to ask if you could just speak a little bit to, one, why do you think there is a lack of trust between unhoused communities, city officials, and their contractors? And two, why do you think the needle is not moving?
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think that let's start with the trust question. I think, this is oversimplifying, but certainly part of the fundamental problem is that city, I'll use a city government as the best example. It responds to homelessness, because of both the human need, but also because the housed community says do something. Right? And so one of the things that city governments do is because they don't have all these other tools that would be more helpful, they have the police dealing with a lot of the issues that the community wants them to deal with. And that means you've got law enforcement officials who have very limited ability to kind of work collaboratively with folks on the street. So, boom, no trust right there. You've got the face of city government interacting with people, and that's the dynamic. So that's a starting point. And then, it's things like clean out sweeps, those just multiply that feeling, because then it's kind of a sense that like the city is just pushing us around. How could that ever be something that builds trust? I think now, there's probably more to say about that, but let me move on to the other part. Why aren't we moving the needle? And this is something that the class that I do want to pause just to note that the class, there's about 20 of my students here, from UCSC who are looking at this question. The class is called Solving Homelessness, and it's not called that because I'm trying to tell them how to solve homelessness. I'm trying to tell them what's going on so that they can solve it, because I have been trying in my way to help with that, and we aren't moving the needle that well. So, but I think one of the things that we talk about so much in the class, which I think is central to that question, is that so much of the system that we have to respond to homelessness is totally reactive. It's like people are homeless as the starting point of how the system responds, and then tries to sort of one by one say, how can we help that person? What can we do? What should we do with each person involved? But the reality is that we have this social system, this governmental system, this economic system that generates a tremendous amount of homelessness. And we aren't changing that very much. So even if, I'll just use the simplest number, if in this community, in a year, the system of homelessness response gets 600 people who'd been unhoused into housing, that sounds pretty good. That's helpful. That's really helpful. But if 600 other people lose their housing in the same year, which is in fact what happens, we don't sense that we've moved the needle. We haven't moved the needle. We've helped individuals, but we haven't created a systematic solution.
Right.
No, me too.
I had a comment to that. It's not. I totally understand, because that's a big problem. Being with Wood Street and coming from where we came from, we look at things, I think, on a micro level. Down here on the ground, it's sort of overwhelming to look at the bigger picture. How do you end homelessness? That's overwhelming to think of that, because when it comes down to how do you end homelessness, if we're thinking about everybody having a space they can call their own, there's a dollar amount connected to that. And I think that's too big of a picture that we're focusing on. And in the conversation, no disrespect to you and stuff, we're talking about how do we end homelessness. We're talking about, no disrespect to the students, how the students can think about ways to end homelessness. But I don't hear people saying, how do the unhoused help end homelessness? How are we interacting with them? How are we going out there and communicating with them? What do they need at this moment? Because, first of all, everyone's not ready to go into housing from being homeless. They're just not. They're not going to, they can't. It's no disrespect, because I was there. It's hard to be in one space, a community, and to be ripped away from that community, to be put in housing by yourself somewhere on the other side of town, in a different county, wherever, and then expect to be able to be high functioning in society as fast paced as it's moving. We have to remember to think micro, on the ground level. And what I mean on the ground level really quick is what we do is just going out. The most simple form of support is just showing up for people. And how do you get to know those people is that you could be consistently showing up, doing something for a group of people that you see every day. Me and my friends are going to go out once a week. We're going to bring food. We're going to hang out. We have some tables there. We're going to sit down and talk to them so we can hear what they have to say, so we can be more effective in implementing the ideas and the things that they need, not what we see unhoused people in their direction they need to go. We need to find out from them. But it really starts, I'm just stressing so much, it's just on that giving love and support on that level, the things that we overlook every day with one another.
If I may, the root cause of homelessness is the cost of housing. So I know that a lot of other things are focused on, but the root cause of homelessness is the cost of housing, the high cost of housing. So until we focus on that while we're simultaneously providing all these other services, we're not going to solve that problem. And also I will say, while the funding for homelessness is going on executives and on high-ranking CEOs and things like that, and all the money is going on staffing, very little of that homeless funding actually makes it to the homeless individual. So that's also a huge contributor to this problem, if not the main one.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you were saying, John, I mean, that's what I really quickly saw in my reporting for the book was rather than think about that big picture that in the moment is impossible to solve, and maybe in the course of generations it's possible, but to take a relational approach. And we may have all sorts of desires about how our elected officials would or would not approach the issue, but we all have the ability to actually go out, find some way to connect with our local unhoused community. It can be kind of a daunting thing if you haven't sort of, pierced that poverty veil, as I call it. But once you do, it's actually an amazing thing. You're like, oh, they're just like me, and like we can just hang out and be normal. And that kind of hanging out and being a normal human is, I think, the sort of the unknown solution, so to speak. It's something that like a paid staff person at a homeless services agency, because they're getting paid, like they gotta get through their day and check off everything on their checklist, and they can't just sit down with someone for like 4 hours or whatever it takes and do that every week, and to the point where that person really trusts them, and that something builds very organically, right? As opposed to like, here's the menu of programs that are available to you. Let me know which one you would like, and okay, you select that one, well, okay, on Tuesday at 8 a.m., be at this address, and the person doesn't show up. Because they're just disconnected from that, It's not integrated in who they are. But I began to see and get to know so many housed people who involved themselves in the lives of unhoused people very intimately, to where that veil disappeared and where all the lines blurred. And what I saw come out of that over a period of years of observing it was that people that were unhoused and they were having those types of relationships, they slowly kind of like did the things that they needed to do to move forward in their lives. So that they all wanted to move forward in their lives in different ways, but they had different paces, they had different obstacles, there's no program, government-funded program that really has that like fine tactile touch, that beating heart, that actually that makes someone feel safe, makes someone feel heard, makes someone feel like, I could do that. And so, part of the amazing thing about Wood Street is that it was this blended community of housed and unhoused. And, so many people started, thinking about sobriety and acting on sobriety and going on that very, very long journey. Like, you can't just drop someone off at a rehab center and expect them, to be sober a month later. Like, that's extremely rare. And, but when you surround someone over a period of years with a very supportive, loving, non-judgmental kind of environment, the magic happens. And so that's what, groups like Santa Cruz Homeless Union and Food Not Bombs and so many other groups that, have next to nothing in terms of a budget, accomplish. So, I focus on that because we can just jump around and yell all day long about how all the money is being spent and how those programs are designed, and it is important to talk about that too. But like what we all have, agency over is like, what could I do this week, and it really boils down to friendship and dissolving those invisible barriers.
So here, a question in the audience.
Yeah, 2 remarks and a question. How many of you have read the book End of Jobs? There's not enough work for so many human beings, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. But there is there's no jobs. There's lots of societal work to do, though. Yes. And we do it in conferences like this at different levels. But I finished reading the book that I referred to you, for you to get about the researcher of New York for 10 years, and about horrible Giuliano and Bloomberg. And when any goddamn billionaire could buy housing for every human in the country, right? Yeah. It's absurd. And the real estate and insurance companies, a quote that I say all the time. I mean, from time to time for 10 years. Insurance and real estate, the whores of capitalism. The real whores of capitalism.
Absolutely. Oh. And I do want to open it up. I wanted to, before we do that, just do one more go around to the table, and then we're going to open it up. So Don, respond, and then I want you guys to respond.
One thing that you both of you pointed out that I do want to amplify with a little bit different angle is one thing that has really changed even in the more formal system of response to homelessness, and you represent this, many of you at this table, is people who have been homeless with lived expertise, lived experience, are now being the ones who are out talking to folks in the community, on the streets, in the woods, wherever. And that this is not brand new, but it's a really important change in many organizations now, where there's such a recognition that it's folks who have that experience who are going to engage on a real level with folks who are unhoused. Because if I do it, I can be, I don't want to minimize what Brian said about, like, I can be a kind person and listen, but I think there's even an extra premium of someone who's been there. And I'm so glad to say that, I know several organizations here, and I'm sure it's true across the country because I've attended national meetings about this, where that is really being elevated, that folks with the lived experience are now doing the work and getting paid to do it, which is a good thing too. I'm not saying all of you are, but some, but I get it. But I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing when they are able to be paid. That's good, it's good work. They're really skilled at doing that work. And I think that's one of those places where we can do better, because as you have said so eloquently, people were just told, here's what we have for you. And now we can do more like, what do we want to do together?
So Alicia has been a homeless person that's feeling did exactly what he's talking about, and her experience would be worth hearing right now.
I've been 10 years homeless in Santa Cruz, Keith.
Well, I want to let other people speak, but I will say that, and I appreciate that we now have had our voices lifted up and we've kind of, risen up to speak on all these things. What's unfortunate is that we've had to really work and fight for our seat at that table. We were not ever invited willingly. And so, that's the problem. And when you're talking about trust, that's the problem.
I mean, first step is the seat at the table, and then are you listened to? Or are you just there as a sort of token,
That's why we write.
Yeah. So,
I just wanted to say that also, that's that's part of our leadership development model too, is like us being able to work up. I mean, having the skill, it's not even the experience, it's the skill. It takes skills to survive on the streets. And
That's right.
we're very resourceful people. And so having that skill and knowing what we need, we can best, you know, help and support each other. And that's also where the trust comes from. We actually genuinely care about each other. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about what Brian was saying earlier about, like, you know, people in recovery and stuff. And it's about first like meeting people where they're at and letting them make the decision for their own selves and stop trying to force, you know, what we think is right for people. And that's why we are now, I think people realize their little Band-Aid ass solutions aren't working, and maybe we should actually talk to the people that, you know, don't fit into this cookie cutter mold of, oh, because you're a drug addict, or oh, because you're lazy, or you're a criminal. No, like Alicia was saying, it's because people can't afford to pay for rent. And the fastest age group in homelessness growing right now is 55 and up. Why? Not because our uncles and grandmas and grandpas are lazy or drug addicts. It's because they're on fixed income and they can't afford to live in California anymore without being unhoused. And so it's also about changing the narrative. And I just want to say that there's a lot of power in our words, you know, and even I do it too. I call it an encampment, but it's not an encampment. Those are our communities. Those are our homes. Those are our families. And so even when we start changing the narrative, people aren't homeless out here. We were born and raised in Oakland, California. This is our home. We just don't have a house with, you know, foundations and what normal people would consider a house. And so you know, we have to start changing those narratives too, and also letting folks know that they're also one paycheck away from being unhoused and with us on the streets. And I think that's where a lot of the folks and our allies out there that would come down and support us, because they realize this reality of this capitalist society that we live in, and this fast growing, the way that they're gentrifying Oakland, especially West Oakland, where our community was, and they built this wonderful, you know, whatever, ballers damn stadium in our home. But it's about meeting people where they are and loving them where they are, and then when they're ready, because you've built that trust, because you actually showed some genuine compassion and spent time and got to know people and got to know their stories, then when they want to make that change, they know where to go. So to be fully transparent, my own self, I was an intravenous, you know, fentanyl, meth, and heroin addict. And it was because my community, the support that I had, that I knew that I could go to people that genuinely care, that weren't trying to force me in a direction. I'll be celebrating 3 years this year. Yeah, and you know, to have now that experience with my friends out there that still suffer with substance abuse problems, but to actually be that experience now and to help guide them, not in a road of recovery, but just towards a more healthy way of living. Let's start with nutrition and things like that. And so those are the type of, you know, support that we need for people that are still continuing to live outside. And yeah, I don't know, I talk a lot, but.
No, thank you. I'm gonna kind of leave one more thought on the table here before we open it up. You know, one thing I've thought a lot about is, like, how can we do this, right? If you believe, as I do and as everybody at this table does, that, you know, allowing unhoused communities to find their way to stabilize themselves where they're at, to work together as a community, and rather than being tormented constantly by sweeps, like if you believe that that is a pragmatic solution, I believe it's a highly pragmatic solution. You know, what does that actually look like, right? Because the city's perspective is usually, well, they got all these people at their throats saying, like, clean this place up, right? And they're responding to that, you know, voter pressure. And cities aren't very good at, like, that sort of, like, subtle, relationship building, like going in, befriending people for years before you then like make a decision together as a community, right? Like they don't typically work that way. But like, I think that there are examples where this has happened and we have visited some of them. And it can happen. It takes sort of, the city letting down its guard a little bit and being a little bit more loose with how they enforce their laws and flexible and creative and rather than, taking that sort of like big brother approach, like I'm coming in and this is what we're gonna do, like stepping back and educating their constituents, like hey, like we can't just sweep these people away because we're just sweeping them down the block and we're spending all your taxpayer money in the process and we're actually making them more homeless, more traumatized, more addicted. And so like that's not working, so like you're gonna have to tolerate a little bit of what you might perceive as disorder. But like if you went out there and connected with those people, you might actually forget about that sense of disorder that seems to bother you and find something else instead. So I know it's possible. I have seen incredible examples of it working. And I hope that we can do much, much more of it. I want to first open it up to the students. Is there a student with a question?
First, I want to say thank you guys so much for hosting this panel. I've had a great experience with this class and feel like it's one of the most...
Eat the mic.
Sorry. It's one of the classes I've taken here I've learned the most. But for my question, I wrote it down, so forgive me if it sounds weird. People claim that structured drug or substance rehabilitation must be through a government or system-funded program. However, based on your experiences and community emphasis, what do you think are the community pillars or resources that can be provided that would help aid that?
First of all, the count is inaccurate. Institutional rehabilitation systems don't really work for everyone. They can't encapsulate everyone. So you have to reach that person and find out what that person needs and requires.
Individually.
And I just want to say that one of the other things that I'm working on is I have a radio segment. It's called The Addiction Doula, connecting people to traditional ways to be reborn and liberated from drugs and addiction. And so one of the things that I work on is creating alternatives to 12-step recovery. There's many different things. For me, it was connecting to my ancestral traditions with my spirituality. There's plant medicines, it's also like a lot of these big pharma want to take people off of one street drug and put them on a pharmaceutical drug. And so really it's like goes back to the thing of community and support and having folks that are there to wrap around you, to help you out, just get back on that path. Yes, I did go into a drug treatment program in the beginning just to get away for a minute. But then when I went back, I was very much surrounded and supported by my community, and that's what gave me the strength to keep pushing. And so 12-step programs can work sometimes. No, they shouldn't be forcing people like they are in San Francisco right now. That's ridiculous. Like their care centers or whatever, that you can't force somebody to get off of drugs, but definitely just giving them that support and showing them better ways to live healthy. Yes.
I just want to add one thing to that. When you come to the encampment level, the community level, down on the street, one thing that works really well for, I would say, from my experience, is having something to do. A lot of when the camps get organized, that empowers them, that gives them a responsibility, something to do each day. So it wasn't quitting just all at one time. It was like, oh, this couple of hours what I normally would be getting high, I'm actually out there cleaning up. Me and my brother out there cleaning up, or we're doing something else, or we're like hyped up and we're gonna go down to a city council meeting. So that's giving us time away from those bad habits, and it just sort of starts pulling you away from that, and an empowerment of feeling like you are worth something. You know what I mean? While you're out there, because it started for all of us when we're out there in community.
But it starts first with love. Everyone is different. So you start with love, talk to the person, get to know the individual, see what they need.
I just want to add, because it kind of goes along with everything that you just heard, that substance abuse is primarily, a lot of studies have shown, due to trauma. So addressing trauma is the best way to help a person make that step, address the trauma. And don't put a person into more trauma. If you cannot help them, do not make the situation worse.
Hi, my name's Elise. I'm a longtime community organizer, and I set out to understand homelessness because as a political organizer, I was living in yards, living in campaign cars, couch surfing, etc. I was also having issues with domestic violence, and the two things were kind of impacting each other, but the domestic violence led me to say, hey, I'm so broke, I might as well be an organizer because I'm not going to get paid or paid well. So it was awesome. And so I learned a lot about organizing. I've organized for many groups. I've gotten paid doing it. And then I wanted to understand, and obviously it was an economic equation, right? So I just want to say a couple things about organizing, first of all. So what we're talking about here is like day services, counseling services, social work services. So I was going to be a very gentleman, womanly art therapist, and I went to get my PhD in Boston, where all the programs I loved were. I already had my BA, and I got a great job as an entry-level recreation therapist, serving 16 blind or profoundly retarded women, which was a terrible moniker, when the Reagan cuts hit. Now, how many people here know about the Reagan cuts? Just raise your hand. Raise your hand real quick. Okay. The Reagan cuts decimated the mental health funding at the time through the federal funding, okay? This type of thing is constantly happening within the capitalist system, our political system in the US, right? We're seeing cuts to SNAP, EBT right now, drastic cuts, never had it in like 40 years, okay? This is the ping pong ball we play. We've already discussed it here, and I just want to say in Don's favor, I used to see him at shelters. I really wanted to know, and I took the Zen approach, I wanted to know what the F was happening with the bottom level homeless services, and that's because a lot of my clients went out onto the street. So we took 100 years to get to that point in the mid-'80s where we were going to develop community programs, residential programs for people with developmental disabilities, people with emotional what you might call more psychological and not just developmental disabilities. So what I'm also trying to connect here is there are so many solutions. And this panel, as good as it's been, I've been to a lot of these over the I've been organizing and investigating homelessness since easily 2014 when I really went hard here. So, and helping homeless people try to save their stuff, working with Alicia, Kuhl. We do not have a homeless union that's building an organized union. We do not have organizers going out like the UFW, like labor unions. That history is really crucial, and you can usually get a labor history course, a labor politics course at the local community college. I did. There's been books written on the importance of nonviolence in organizing. Erica Chenoweth's book about how revolutions that are nonviolent are so much more successful, and they investigated like hundreds. So we need, I'm getting there, we need a union that's constructively building a homeless union.
We actually are.
And we
There's
need to do that. We need to use power, grassroots power. Can I just finish? We need grassroots power because the capitalist system is never going to give us, and I used the mental health example of the Reagan cuts to try to show. I was working for black women in Dorchester, Mattapan Mental Health Center, and when they got up and said, look, our funding's been decimated, we've never seen anything like this. This is typical in our system, and we have to decide, and I just want to say one more thing, we don't have enough caseworkers, absolutely. I was in Paul E. Lee Loft. I went to all those services down there. I wanted to know what was going on. I was in the River Street shelter. We do not have enough caseworkers. We do not have enough social workers. The government will not fund that. them. Look at what's happening with the Republican Party. They're
Well,
shooting
even if
Americans
they
in the
did,
streets.
excuse me, even if they
So-
did, if we could refund all of those things that you're speaking of, we would still have a homeless situation because the cost of living is not matched.
Right, but that's a part of the same problem. We shouldn't have to suffer for working at low-paying jobs and not having affordable housing. Thank you. We have solutions. It's about time we implement it.
Amen.
Okay.
I'm just gonna,
We need a union that really organizes. A union.
hello.
Be the one.
My name's Carl Fox. I came to Santa Cruz when I was 12 years old, 1967. We moved down from Oakland. Ultimate support and recognition for the homeless people of Oakland. I always felt like Oakland had a much bigger heart than Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is a place with a lot of natural beauty. I became homeless when I turned 57. And one other point, Mr. Lane, there was a survey almost 40 years ago, most homeless-friendly town in America. Santa Cruz came in #1. After that, the city leaders freaked out and said, we got to change this reputation that we have. And now, there's two main factors. Keep them moving and give them a citation. That means sweeps and drag them through the courts.
Yep.
Okay. Recently, I did find a way out of that in Santa Cruz. That happened 3 years ago. I became a live-in caregiver. I now have a place to live, and I get a paycheck at the same time. There's a lot of aging people in Santa Cruz that might work for someone else who's homeless. I'm going to speak to the class back there, okay? There's two things in Santa Cruz that I see making people angrier and angrier on both sides of the equation. I understand why the homeless people are getting more angry from the approach of the city of Santa Cruz. But why are all the rich people getting so angry all the time? This is a unique situation. Some of the richest people and poorest people in California living side by side. So me and my daughters did write a plan specifically for Santa Cruz. I handed some copies out today. The two tenets of the plan is, if we're going to take care of this humanitarian crisis, we need to have pride of residency for every homeless person. And for the rich people, we need to create no unsightliness, because that's what they care about. So I wrote a little plan over here for a homeless beach camp. California has to realize these beaches are not just for tourists and their residents. It's also a way to help solve this crisis we're in. Okay? I left my address there, my email at the bottom. I'd be happy to answer questions or dig in this anytime.
Thank you so much.
I've been waiting for this moment for 10 years.
Can I also say that there is no one particular way to end homelessness? First of all,
Correct.
there's just not. There's all types of different dynamics to address homelessness. And it's okay for the house to be upset. It's okay for the homeless people to be upset. We have to productively use that anger to actually address the situation. We should be upset. We should be upset with the city council members and all of those type of people. So please, students, get to your city council member meetings.
There's a lot of people in this room that you guys can learn from, so I love the idea of addressing the students, but also letting other folks ask questions too. And so I would really like to see all strata, all economic strata in the society accommodated for, including the list of people that Alicia gave that cannot be in houses. And this funding is raised for the homeless. It's not raised to eliminate homelessness. It's it's so that people like these guys here can actually support each other and know these horrible laws that are coming down the pike, like the one I just read about in San Jose, where if you refuse services 3 times, you can be arrested. You know, there's a lot that people need to be organizing and supported. So this money, I think, I would love to see to change the phrasing. We're not going to eliminate homelessness. There's going to be more and more people. And also, you put somebody in a house, they could just kill themselves because they don't, they don't know how to manage the money and the whole system and they've been outside for a long time.
And on top of that, when their community, they get cut off from their community,
They get cut off from their community.
that makes it like the clincher.
And then too, I've seen people get money, get housing, and die for all kinds of different reasons. And then that's a great revolving door for these systems that can say, oh, we house so many people, but they don't say how many people lost their housing or died. No. Anyway, that's my
Hi, thank you guys so much. This was incredibly informational. I am not in Professor Dawn's class. I came with my friend, so learned a lot from you guys. But I was curious about Professor Dawn and John, what you guys were talking about. Of course, centering unhoused voices. You guys having a seat at the table that's discussing your lives is essential, obviously. And I hadn't thought about before the intricate details that go into the day-to-day life and the communities supporting each other. I live up in Berkeley, so we have People's Park in Berkeley. Had People's Park in Berkeley. We had protests, we had SWAT showing up. Now they have shipping containers just sitting there taking up the space, just so that the unhoused can't.
We have a Berkeley homeless union.
Oh, you do? Okay, awesome. I live in Berkeley. I moved out literally today. But anyway, besides the point. I was curious, I guess, in order to address homelessness overall, I guess I'd always thought about it as providing housing rather than providing what you guys say you need, what the individuals on the most intimate level in the communities actually need. So I'm wondering, is there a way to bridge the gap between the day-to-day and helping the individuals and translating that, like Professor Dawn was talking about, to a policy level so that sweeps like they do in San Francisco and stuff, so that can be addressed while simultaneously helping out the individuals on that level?
That was a hot question.
That was a lot. It's policy. I hate policy, but you can't address one of the. I mean, like Monty said, and there's so many different ways to address homelessness, and one of the ways that needs to start today is stop the sweep. You can't address it. You have nowhere for them to go. You can't think anything's going to get better when you're just destroying their lives, a small life that they just, rebuilt for them last week, losing all their documents, social security card, all the stuff they need to be able to function in society or just to move forward and stuff. You can't expect anything different. And it just goes to if there is nowhere for people to go, then what are you doing? Right. It doesn't make any sense. They're not going anywhere. And in Oakland, just really quick, there's 5,500 people that are unhoused. And we have 1,200 shelter beds with about 300 of those beds shutting down in about the next 3 months. But they still continue on doing those sweeps. I say you gotta stop the sweep. When you talk about policy, I'll pass that on to this young lady.
No, I was just gonna say housing, ending the homelessness, how it doesn't end with shelter. Sorry, that's what I was just trying to say. Shelter is just the first step. There's a lot of support that needs to happen for our folks that are moving inside, that are transitioning inside. And so reimagining what supportive housing actually looks like, peer support. We were talking about it earlier, but showing people where the new food bank is after you've taken them out of one community and put them way on the other side of the city, riding with them on the bus the first time to go to their doctor's appointments, or showing them how to budget or how to cook on a regular stove versus a propane stove now, or just things like that people don't necessarily think about. They think that, oh, we made this person's life better because we threw them inside. Well, now they're isolated. And we have a friend that, Jamie, I always think about her. She's like, I'd rather go back to my car. And she moved into a brand new place over in Oakland, Brooklyn Basin. but you know, she has no community and she feels really isolated and she doesn't know where to get food and, you know, she does, you know, you're throwing people in there and now they've got PG&E bills and rent and all this stuff and nobody really thinks about that. They just think, oh, we helped them out because we gave them some housing, and so that's the part that really helps. And also showing people how to be self-sustainable also. Like we were also talking about all these funding cuts that are coming up, and so showing people ways that they can continue to be independent and not have to be so dependent on these systems of government and things like that.
Just for a little bit of facts, for Suicidal Watch, since I've been back in my place, since I've been housed, I felt to be suicidal at least 10 times so far, and I've been here a year and a half. It is very lonely. They just threw me in there. They took me away from my support group, and it just doesn't work that way. I need all of that support that I had before, and this is what we were telling them then. They just weren't listening. So I just wanted to put that into perspective. I have therapists and a plethora of different things now that are aiding me, but a house isn't just the answer.
And let me say too really quick that when we were talking about, the woman was talking about solutions and stuff, and I actually live in a solution. So I didn't go into project-based housing. I actually got the blessing of a lifetime to move into a place called Home Fullness, a poor people's solution to homelessness, and it's ran by Poor Magazine, and so where I live at, I can live there rent-free forever housing. And so what that did is that gave me the chance that now I don't have to be in this rat race of trying to worry about rent. I never have to worry about eviction ever. I can continue my own personal healing and still continue to give back to my community and do the work that I can without getting paid, because you know, it's a place that we've all experienced homelessness. Everyone, there's 25 of us that live there. We're in deep East Oakland. We just opened Homefulness 2 down the street. We just unsold a piece of land in San Francisco, that's Homefulness 3. And we're working with Etna Street Solidarity in LA to Vanguard to open Homefulness 4 down there. And so we've been like working to, you know, bit by bit, trying to get people, and Brian actually talks about it in his book also about homefulness. But that's a solution that is outside, no government funding, but it's a different way, and it's a way to reimagine what community looks like for us. We have a school, and we have our own media program, so it's our voices telling our own stories, not the media saying what it is and what it isn't, but yeah, we write books and all kind of stuff. We do our own community give back, and we continue to fight, you know, for the rights of poor and indigenous and houseless people.
That's right.
And I think to answer your question too, it's about meeting people where they're at. So each person is going to need something different. Each person might need, you know, support when they move. Some people don't need case management. You know, it's about meeting the person where they're at. And also, it's really important to acknowledge that while we don't have housing for people, they still have basic needs that need to be met on a daily basis. That includes food, that includes, you know, warmth, that includes water, that includes shower. And so providing these basic needs are really essential to individuals while we don't have housing. And that's also, you know, why we say stop the sweeps, because that's not supporting a person when you don't have housing for them.
Right. And we're not just saying stop the sweeps. I mean, like she said, things need to happen at the sites where they are. We're talking about leaving people where they are and giving them services where they are. It makes no sense to spend more money to displace the people for them to just go in a circle and come right back to that same block. Right. So it's structured what we're telling them will work.
Where do you two gentlemen live now?
I live in San Leandro, California.
I live in East Oakland. You know, I got housed about 2 years ago in a brand new building.
Public housing?
Add one more piece to
supportive
services response, which is, this is going to sound a little bit bureaucratic and clinical, but it's really important. One of the folks who just came to speak to our class, because we have lots of guest speakers in the UCSC class, is someone called, his name is Colin. He's someone a few of us know here, and he had been homeless here in Santa Cruz, and now he works as what's called a housing stabilization specialist. And that sounds kind of fancy, but it kind of goes right at this question, which is, when people move from the street indoors into an apartment, it's a whole new world, right? And it's not going to work for a lot of people. Some people it'll work, they're just on their own, but a lot of folks need more. They need connection. And that's what Colin does. He spends time with the folks he works with, just constantly saying, I'm here for you. What do you need? Tell me what do you want to do? Here's some ideas, but it's up to you. You don't have to do anything. I mean, it's a really great approach, and it really is based on this notion that it is really hard to, for some people to make that transition, especially if they've been unhoused for a long time, to be back in this apartment, right? So anyway, the reason I want to emphasize that is the system is very slow to react to things, but it does learn, and it's really it's frustrating because that kind of thing that Colin does didn't really exist very many years ago, and now organizations have folks who do this, and that's a real gain. And so we just have to, even as the situation can be grim in the big picture, it's important to see where we are finding new successes, and I just wanted to lift that one up.
I'm sorry, but the problem is that we already know those things, and there's not enough call-ins around the world to address the situation right now. You're talking like learning and slow. We understand that it's slow. We're saying, fuck being slow. We need help right now.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jessie. Hi, Alicia. I'm a reporter here in town, and so somewhat selfishly, I want to ask about media representation of homeless people, both, for those of you with lived experience, either in reading about reporting on homeless people or with interacting with journalists, yourself, Brian, or others. What has worked well for you, or what have you liked seeing in reporting, and then what are things that you don't like seeing in media representation, or have had negative interactions with people reporting on your community?
Can I answer your question with a question? Why is it when they're talking about homeless people, when the homeless people gets to speak for themselves, it's a snippet, but when it's something negative that happens like at an encampment or a community, they get all of the play in the world. Yeah. They'll replay it and replay it and replay it and replay it. But when it's time to talk about solutions, they don't give us any airplay.
I think that's a really good point, and I think historically, in Santa Cruz here, looking back, I've only been reporting here for a couple of years, but you do see that. You see a lot of focusing on incidences of violence, or focusing on the perspective of housed people looking at unhoused community. And so, I don't know, obviously you guys are familiar with my reporting. I would say one thing is the death of media, right? Mm-hmm. There's not enough people to go out and build relationships and be covering homelessness as a stable beat. Our beloved reporter here who was doing that kind of work sadly passed, likely won't be
Jessica York.
Jessica York. Yeah. I think for me, personally, I think in my organization, we do try to, not focus on things like that there's this concept of solutions journalism and going out to people. I spoke with Alicia this morning about, a situation where homeless people are trying to find a solution to a really tough situation. But and that's why I asked the question, is because I know this has been, there's been, similar to what was discussed before, a lot of distrust. And so, that's, I guess, why I wanted to ask.
We do what Brian's doing, we write. We just keep writing.
Young lady in the black with her hand up.
Well, I can answer that real quick. It's getting better here in Santa Cruz. It used to be a couple years ago where it seemed like the hateful side of things was getting most of the media attention. I do feel like, especially with you, Santa Cruz Local, with the Lookout, things are getting a little more fair in that regard about telling both sides of the story. But I do feel like before it was much about creating a narrative for like the city's and the county's point of view, and that they need help and they need tools to deal with these homeless people. And so, but I do feel like the narrative is shifting.
I actually wanted to address you. Language matters. And I've worked, my career has been with people with disabilities, and we were taught they're not disabled people. They're people with disabilities. Put people first in language, and just write with intent. That's it.
Very cool.
I want to reflect to the three of you, John, Monte, and Ifaloya, that what you describe and what you helped to create in Wood Street Commons is like the dream, actually. And so many people that I know who are housed and have so much are depressed, and you guys all talked about isolation, and I think that that is such a deep sickness in our society, and what you created on your own with your immediate community, like from scratch, is so human and so beautiful, and it's what so many people are missing who think they have so much and think they have so much figured out, and it's shocking. Like there's the contrast between like having what you think you need, whereas Wood Street Commons created what people really need.
You know what? And we didn't fit inside their box, and people expected us to be sad or miserable, and we was
party.
We was down there cooking T-bone steaks from good eggs and salmon and swordfish and all kind of weird stuff, And we were having parties and we were inviting people, but we were also like opening it up and trying to take the mask off and be like, no, we're not creepy, we're not scary, we're actually people and we have names. And it even goes even deeper to like, and I don't even want to go into no rabbit hole about, just what they've done. I mean, in Oakland specifically, African Americans are disproportionately represented, but we know that we live and thrive in community, and that's totally out of the American dream or whatever about, oh, let me get mine, and as long as I got mine, I don't have to worry about anybody else, or if I, out of sight, out of mind. And that's not how it was out there. It was like, well, we got something, and let's share and let's help out everybody. And we got our food stamps. Let's go spend some, and put together, and you bring this and I'll bring that. And it was just about us like looking out for each other, and thank you for saying that. And it's like they were mad because they were paying all this money for their, and we were down there living like fat rats, and we women want to keep it real. So, because they would say that, we would like sneak on their little neighbors' calls, and they'd be like, I wish I could be out there all day and not have to work. And it's like, ooh, well, we got a spot for you now. All BS aside, we were just trying to find a silver lining. You know what I mean? Like trying to just survive and be resourceful and look out for each other. And it was way before COVID that we were down there too. A lot of people try to
But
blame it on
it's nothing
COVID.
different than what you guys do, what housed people do every day. It's like we have it in our minds like it's so, unhoused people are so different. They're Martians or whatever, but we're all human beings, and the exact same things that everybody else do, like celebrate birthdays, celebrate holidays, barbecue, go over to someone's house and just hang out for, and just be with each other. That's what we want to do. That's what everybody does. It's nothing, we weren't doing anything out of the ordinary. We're just doing what everybody else does, what we're supposed to be doing. And that's it. Yeah, it's always amazing to me how it's always sort of like, oh my God, you guys were like, and then it's like, then you reiterate that to them and you realize like, did you guys have a birthday party last night at your friend's house, like for such and such? That's what we were doing. We just were public about it because we didn't have no walls.
I think the reason that, that may not be perceived when you're driving down the road past a camp is because you're seeing that camp through this filter, this poverty veil.
The city doesn't want to pick up our trash, so there's all this trash on the street, so they think it's the unhoused people, but they refuse to give us trash removal services even when we offered to pay $500 a month at Wood Street Commons. And they told us, no, we can't do that because then that would make you guys legit and more people would want to come over there and live. So we raised, we hustled, we tried to do all the things that we were supposed to do to be able to live supposedly like normal human beings and stuff, and we were denied all of that. Sorry.
Yeah, and right now that poverty veil is lifted. You're not looking through that filter because they're up here on a panel speaking to you, but it's the same person, down there on Coral Street, right?
Well, and I will say, I'm glad that you acknowledge this because I've been asking for some sort of we lost MHCAN. I mean, I know that not every homeless person is part of MHCAN, but those issues kind of intersect sometimes. But what would it look like if we had a day center here in Santa Cruz where people can have that communication? They can go and cook a meal. They could have community. They could celebrate a birthday party. We don't have that, and so people are always like, oh, why are these encampments getting together? Because of that community, because they thrive in that community. That's a social aspect, it's a safety net. If we could at least offer that in some small way with some sort of day services here, that would be beautiful. That would really, really help individuals on a daily basis with those needs. It's not always like the thing as I mentioned, it's also communication and that closeness. We need that as much as we need showers and mail.
West White.
Question over. Why don't we move back to the bench lands? Where our friends who had a homeless son, they knew where to find him. And it was a nice place. And it was beautiful. And you guys probably don't know what the bench lands are, but they're right beside the county building. So they're right next to all the services.
Institution, you mean?
San Lorenzo Park.
It was allowed by the city.
Thank you.
I can say a little bit more about that.
Under consideration.
Thank you.
So I actually talked to Lisa Murphy, who used to be part of City of Santa Cruz, and she actually mentioned the bench lands as a win, but also a real loss because it was out of control and all this crazy stuff. I just want to say that the sweep, what's wrong, how to solve the homelessness is give people an address. If they had a number associated with a lot, then they would steward the land and they'd be legitimate. They need to register to vote. They need to be able to run for office. So, and that they're actually being blocked. They're constantly being thefted. There's no way to create a union if everyone's constantly on the run and there's nothing to really believe in because, well, I will help you, I will support you, but then 2 days later I can't find you again.
Right.
It's really hard, and all the money, I'm telling people try to hold their receipts and make a case, a claim against the city, turn it into a small claims, but that would take mass. That's not really going to happen. So while I was talking with the manager, we just got a new ordinance following the governor's orders, and they want to make it to where removal is the only piece of the puzzle that they want. And so I asked her, well, what about curing it? What if they're not a blanket of trash? What if there isn't like cat-sized rats running around their place? Like if it's a minimal health and safety standards being met, can you pass them over? Give them an address. They're not homeless, that's their home. You're stealing their home. As soon as you take it from them, that's when they're homeless. So yeah, no, hey man, I've seen you guys even Cobb on Wood was fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, California is the bigger contributors to homelessness.
So I think we do have to start winding it down, unfortunately, but we can continue the conversation informally afterwards. We'll all be here, but let's do one last question.
Okay, I guess, I think we're sort of addressing this, but I'm thinking about, cities have public funds.
Thank you.
And so how do we direct public funds when the answer, what you guys are saying is really, love and support? Like, how do you direct public funds? And so Don talked about roles, staffing, maybe the hiring process in the city is about looking for people who have lived experience, looking for people who are good listeners, who are compassionate, and not ticking a bunch of numbers. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. There's one project that I was involved in doing some training with where the staff in LA, it was a drop-in center on Skid Row. They were trained at first to just listen. They were going to design it based on what unhoused people were saying to them. And what they did with this drop-in center, it was a place you could sleep as well, is they made, it wasn't dry, you could come in, you could be using there, you could use in there, but you could be using. And then also they made it so that people could sleep in the yard outside because people didn't want to sleep inside. And they called everybody guests. So the staff was trained to be in service, really, you know, so that's something that occurs to me as well. So anyway, yeah.
That's a great approach right there. You just kind of described a really good approach.
I thought that was in your book. I thought what she just said was in your book.
I don't know that it was, but there's so many great examples like that. I think they're maybe the minority, but there's lots of, you know, good case studies to draw from, and you know, there's a lot of room for rejiggering, you know, these services. And I think another one is also, you know, direct payments, you know, basic income, I think, is a very great way to and there's so much evidence that, like, you know, when you cut out that middleman and you just give the money straight to the person you're trying to help, like, there helps so much more.
Use money for housing.
Can I just one other thought in response to what Amy said about, you know, in terms of policy and local policy. One thing I was just at I haven't been on the city council for quite a while, but I went to the last city council meeting because there was an issue on the agenda related to homelessness. And one of the council members said something that essentially was dehumanizing about people experiencing homelessness. And so when I had a chance to get up, I just reminded the city council, hey, you know, these are our neighbors. And I think, you know, I know that sounds simplistic, but that's part of the policy change is changing people's attitudes, right? That if homeless people are a problem, rather than, no, there's unhoused neighbors who we want to bring indoors if we can, but have a good relationship with. I mean, if we could get everybody just thinking about the issue that way, we could solve a lot of the rest of it out of that.
We are
We're
not scary.
So, I want to thank Don for inviting me and making this happen. For the workshop Santa Cruz, trying out to sell the book. To a new friend here in Santa Cruz, Alicia, Kuhl with the Homeless Union, and for everything that we do here. And of course, this big comment. So this is our 13th stop on the Front Street book tour. We're going to be probably the rest of this year going around the country.
Wow.
And that costs a lot of money. You know, my expenses are covered, but we have a GoFundMe going to cover their travel expenses. So there's QR code on these signs here. There's more signs out there by the books. You can click on that and make a donation and help keep these conversations happening. Thank you guys.
And just so everybody knows locally, I have a Facebook group, Santa Cruz California Homeless Union, or Santa Cruz County Homeless Advocates / Santa Cruz Homeless Union. So if you're interested in local things, you can always find me, the Santa Cruz Homeless Union.